Steve Reid, Lord Mandelson remains a member of the House of Lords, taking the Labour whip. Given last night's revelations about loans to his then-partner from Jeffrey Epstein, while he was a cabinet minister, do you think he should be stripped of the whip and possibly his peerage?
Well, I think before taking any action like that, we need to understand exactly what's happened. You're asking me here about something that happened nearly 20 years ago. I don't know the full detail of it. I wasn't in government 20 years ago.
But he himself has said he acknowledges that that money did go to his partner.
That's right. I don't know whether he declared it or not, and he should have done. The declaration rules have been brought in by then, so I think it would be for Peter Mandelson to explain whether or not that money was properly declared, and if not, then he will need to account for that. But I don't want to jump the gun and make assumptions. I think we need to find out exactly what happened
It's
first.
perfectly fair for you to say that you don't know, but ought there to be an investigation by the party?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to hear from Peter Mandelson whether that money was properly declared or not. As I say, it was 20 years ago and I don't know. So I think we need to establish what's gone on before we decide what action we need to take.
The Prime Minister said that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor should be giving evidence to Congress. Should Lord Mandelson also be giving evidence to Congress if asked?
Well, the Prime Minister's point was that foremost in all of our thoughts should be the victims of these horrific crimes. And if anybody has information or evidence that they can share that might help to understand what's gone on and bring justice for those victims, then they should share it, whether that is Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, whether it's Lord Mandelson, or whether it's anybody else. They have a moral obligation to share what they knew so that the victims can help find the justice that they've been denied for so long.
So if evidence from Lord Mandelson could help to illuminate what has happened for the sake of the victims, you would say that's something that he should morally be required to do?
Well, absolutely. You know, the victims of any crime, leave alone crimes as horrendous as these, should do whatever they can to support the victims.
And on Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, it's not clear whether he can be compelled to give evidence to Congress, but the Prime Minister said he should be. If there were a charge against him, would the government comply with an extradition request from the United States?
Well, you're asking me now details of legislation that would depend on the type of offence that may or may not have been committed. It's entirely hypothetical.
But we could envisage that.
I don't think it's sensible for me to come on here and start talking hypothetically about situations that may or may not exist. The principle here is very, very clear. If Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor clearly has insight into what was going on, and he should testify because the victims deserve and need him and anybody else who may have witnessed things to do that.
Are you aware, do you know if the government could compel him to give evidence?
I have no idea whatsoever. No.
Let's talk about the Prime Minister's trip to China. He's back from Beijing today.
Yeah.
After Donald Trump's visit to London, the Prime Minister boasted that he'd landed more than 150 billion quid's worth of American investment. What are you coming back from China with, other than a 30-day visa for business people and a warm handshake?
Well, first of all, we've got a reduction in the tariff on whiskey. That is our country's biggest export in the food and drink sector by value. China, second biggest economy on the planet. To China. That's great for the whiskey sector
because
because
they
they
can
can be
exports. I mean, come on.
It's the biggest food and drink export this country has by value. So the fact that we can now get more of it sold into the second biggest economy in the world is very, very important for Scotland and where the distilleries are located. And I think we should welcome that. A lot of business people went with the Prime Minister to China. They're coming back with over £2 billion of export deals. That's money and investment into the UK economy. Over 370,000 jobs in this country depend on trade with China, and we can expand that further. We need to trade with the second biggest economy in the world. We do trade with them already, and there's an opportunity to expand that. we'll always do it eyes wide open. National security matters too, but so do jobs and investment and wages in this country. And if expanding trade with China can help develop that, then that's what we should be doing.
Well, I'm not going to beat you up about the human rights question for the moment, but just sticking with trade, we've just seen that AstraZeneca, a British-based firm, which has stopped a £450 million investment in Liverpool last year and a £200 million development in Cambridge, is now investing £11 billion in China. And the jobs and the technology go with it. How's that a great deal?
We need to be doing two things here, Trevor. First of all, we need to be trading with China because it benefits the British economy. But secondly, we need to be bringing in investment into the UK economy and make this a more attractive place to do business.
You're telling me you've got 2 billion, so, and I'm telling AstraZeneca is telling us they're sending 11 billion.
I was up with the Chancellor.
To China.
I was in
By my
Leeds.
arithmetic, we've lost 9 billion.
It's not as simple as that. It's not one deal here or there. There's a whole range of deals and a whole global investment sector we need to be attracting into the UK. I was up in Leeds with the Chancellor a few weeks ago announcing we're going ahead with Northern Powerhouse Rail, linking the great cities of the north and making them a more attractive destination for inward investment. We're doing exactly the same with the Oxcam corridor, but linking Oxford and
I get
Cambridge.
all of that, but this sounds like
makes the UK a more attractive destination for investment.
China did us in the deal. We're getting 2 billion, they're getting 11.
But you're just taking one deal and comparing it with another. We're getting more investment in the UK, and we're getting more exports into China. That's good for British jobs, good for British business. Separately, we're making the UK a more attractive destination for inward investment because that also benefits British jobs.
All right. Look, sanctions are being lifted on people, the parliamentarians who spoke out against China on the Uyghur question and so on. They're not very grateful, and they said, we wish to make our position unequivocally clear. We'd rather remain under sanctions indefinitely than have our status used as a bargaining chip, and we'd reject any deal that prioritises our personal convenience over the pursuit of justice for the Uyghur people. Did the Prime Minister promise to lift sanctions on Chinese officials in return?
No, absolutely not. So there was no deal.
There was no deal.
There was no deal of that sort. The Speaker of the House of Commons, when this first happened, was crystal clear that foreign countries should not be sanctioning British members of Parliament just for speaking out on international issues or on behalf of their own constituents. So I think it's quite right the Prime Minister went out there and was absolutely robust about this. He's had those sanctions on those individuals lifted. There are no sanctions lifted on Chinese individuals in return for that.
Just very quickly, are you disappointed that the Prime Minister didn't come back with the dissident Jimmy Lai, the British citizen who has been imprisoned by the Chinese?
Well, we all want to see Jimmy Lai released. The fact that there is now an open dialogue with China, the fact that the Prime Minister raised it directly with President Xi, means that there's an open channel that I hope will lead to the release of Jimmy Lai.
We think that he could be brought back at some point.
I hope it will lead to... I mean, what tends to happen in these situations isn't that you tend to get a release there and then. There is now an open channel of communication and dialogue.
And we are using that actively.
We will keep using that, and my hope is that eventually Jimmy Lai will be freed. I hope that's what happened. With no dialogue, there's no chance of that. With open dialogue, there's hope.
Let's talk about your own area of responsibility. You're about to put £150 million into sprucing up high streets. How can I put this? When you were leader of Lambeth Council, very successful leader, you would have called that level of funding pathetic, wouldn't you?
I certainly wouldn't. I'd have been very grateful if we'd got funding from the government at the time to try and...
In Lambeth, you'd have got 10
bob. That's not the only thing we're doing, Trevor. That sits alongside £5 billion that we're investing through our Pride in Place programme to some of the poorest and most run-down high streets in the country. This also isn't just about money, it's about powers. So one of the things we didn't have when I was a council leader was the ability to restrict the number of bookies, well, there weren't vape shops then, but they're proliferating now all over high streets. Councils have no powers to restrict those, so we're going to give them those powers. Some of the funding that we're making available, they can use to bring empty, boarded-up shops back into use and turn them into something productive. I know, youth centres, meeting places for older people to come together, skills and training centres. It brings footfall back into the high streets, and once you've got people there, they've got money that they're going to spend supporting local businesses. There's not just one sort of amount
Just
of
a
money
matter
you
of
spend when you
interest.
fix high streets. It's more complicated than
You're going
that.
to turn all these things into different kinds of centres and so on. I thought the plan was to turn them into residential housing. That's what you need, isn't it?
Well, we need housing,
A
Trevor.
1.5 million homes.
We need housing, but communities need hearts to them as well. And what happened under the previous government is too many of the beating hearts were ripped out of communities, whether it's the high street, the district centre, the shopping parade. When you see them run down, boarded up, covered in graffiti, dump rubbish everywhere, it tells people that the place they belong to is in steep decline. And what we want to show people is there's a better way forwards. Now, it's not the government that's got all the answers. It's local people that know best what needs to happen in their area. So with the Pride in Place funding, £5 billion going to 250 areas, it's local people who will decide how that money gets spent, not politicians like me, and that's as it should be.
Well, you talk about the beating heart of these communities. Let me tell you what I think I hear it on high streets, because Sky sends me out to talk to people. You've hit high street employers with a rise in employers' national insurance. They're about to pay a massive increase in business rates because of revaluation and all of that. And most profoundly, it's interesting, you've rejected a tax on online retailers, which would at least level the playing field between flesh and blood retailers in our high streets and the Amazons and all of those kinds of people. Isn't this 150 million, or even if you're 5 billion, just performative? You're moving deck chairs on the Titanic.
Well, the way you've described that isn't quite accurate, because the giant warehouses used by the online retailers are paying something like £100 million more in business rates, and that money is being used directly to reduce the rates paid by 750,000 retail and leisure businesses on high streets. So we are taxing the giants more in order to support bricks and mortar in the high streets. No, that's a permanent. It's not temporary, Trevor. It's permanent.
The point is the high street retailers have been saying, and actually some of the big retailers, the John Lewis's and Tesco's, have been saying for years, the government doesn't put them on an equal footing to the online retailers. And that's the reason for the death of the high street, because people are buying things at home.
Well, there are 2 points. One, we are making the online giants pay more through their giant warehouses. £100 million is not to be sneezed at, I think. Secondly, for all the investment that we're going to be putting in... For all the investment that we're putting into high streets, what will really revive them is more money in people's pockets, so they've got more money to go out there and spend. And we've now got a situation where wages have gone up more in 1 year with this government than 10 years with the Conservatives. 6 interest rate cuts in a row is giving an average... £1,500 back in people's pockets that they can spend on their high streets. £150 cut in energy bills coming this spring. Money in people's pockets to spend on the high street. So powers to reduce the number of vape shops and bookies, more money in people's pockets adds up to a revival of our high streets.
One of your responsibilities is communities. I know it's England and Wales and so on, but it's been interesting talking over the last 3 weeks to the political leaders in Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast. All of them, including your Labour colleague, who's First Minister in Wales, believe that there could be nationalist First Ministers in those 3 cities before the end of this year. Does it occur to you that yours could be the government that sets out on the road to the end of the Union?
Well, this government will do everything we can to defend and protect that precious union of the nations across the United Kingdom. It's a fool's errand to predict the outcome of elections where nobody's cast a single vote yet, Trevor. We will be fighting very hard to maximise the Labour vote, whether it's in Scotland or in Wales, and indeed the local elections across England
I'm interested
as well.
You're optimistic you might hold on to Wales, you reckon?
Well,
I'm not a big call.
Like I said, it's a fool's errand to predict any election before anybody's cast a single vote. We're going to get out there and we're going to fight our hardest to win.
Yes, I wish we had more time, because I would have said on that, it's easier to hold on to councils if you don't hold elections. You know that you're getting...
But we're going through the biggest reorganisation of local government in a generation. Where there have been cancellations, it's because the council is being abolished. Next year, people will vote for the new council that will be continuing.
To be continued. Steve Reid, thank you for your time this morning.
Pleasure, Trevor.